let's have a chat about those books I read in the month of September. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris and today's video is my September wrap-up for 2022. Before we jump in to that wrap-up, make sure you're checking that description box down below for links to my Discord and also social media should you feel so inclined to join me along for the ride. Jumping into this video, I read 6 books, well 6.5 in the month of September, with one carrying over to October, but I'll give you some, preliminary thoughts on what I've read so far. Most of these books sat around the 3.5 mark, which means I had a pretty okay month, but nothing sort of stood out to me with the exception of one. I had one 3.25, three 3.5s, one 3.75, and then one almost 5-star for my own reading tastes. Jumping into it, my 3.25 star was To Those We Found by George Ander. Now the reason this is sort of 3.25 is it is a YA novel, which I don't read a whole lot of, don't really enjoy a whole lot of YA personally, but this one was pretty decent and had a good premise. This is a first contact YA novel and we're following Taman Yetta. He wins the lottery and he gets to go and compete in what's called the Artemis Report. To do this, he has to leave all his friends and family behind, and knowing that they will probably pass away by the time he reaches his destination many light years away. When he arrives on this new planet, he sort of wakes up in a laboratory that doesn't look like pristine, it's kind of dirty. Then he escapes and everything really isn't what it seems. He has arrived at this competition late and only has 3 weeks to find out what is going on, and it's about his journey of discovering that maybe things that we're told aren't all black and white, and we have to piece some things together for ourselves. This book really does deal with a lot of important themes which I wish I had read when I was younger, and the one that shines through is acceptance of sexuality. So that was a really special moment for me to experience while reading this book, and there will be a full review for this one up on the channel if you want to learn a little bit more about it later this month. Jumping into the 3.5 star reads, the first one I had was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Now the first 30% of this book was excellent and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the setup of Dara and Io, I think her name was, and the sort of realization that, you know, they weren't actually what they thought they were and how they've been manipulated and whatnot. I thought that was awesome. But then it sort of switched. So basically for the first 30% we get this setup, these young kids who have been put in a role that they didn't choose and they're sort of just making the best of things, but there's a very definite class system that is happening between the colours. So each of the, groups within this book have a colour, and Darrow is red. So he is part of Red Rising. Once he realises that things aren't as they seem and there is a bigger picture at play, he then gets taken and they try and transform him to be something else. So as part of his training they go and play a game. The game takes up a majority of this book, and the game honestly gets a little bit long in the tooth in my opinion, and it could have been done much faster. I don't remember a whole lot of the book itself, to be completely honest. This is one of the first ones that I read in the month of September, but I do remember thinking that first 30% was awesome and then the game just got a little bit long-winded and I lost sort of interest along the way. But I have heard that if you don't really gel with this book, it does get better the further you go into the series. So I am interested in picking up the rest of the series. I did this one on audio and the narration was excellent and basically made me continue on with the book even though I wasn't really vibing with it. So I will probably continue the series on audio if it is the same narrator. The next 3.5 star was an ebook. This was The Invisible Tether by J.P. McDonald. And this one was actually a lot of fun, but it lacked a little bit of depth for me personally. So I described this one as John Marston's Tomorrow When the War Began crossed with Dean Koontz's Frankenstein series. We have a bunch of kids who are going to do a sporting event, they're going to a university games, and their plane gets hijacked. They crash and they have to figure out what the hell is going on. They soon realize that there are what looks like clones coming to clean up the mess and basically look for them to try and kill them rather than save them. And they have to sort of get home and figure out where these clones have come from and why they're there in the first place, and start piecing together that puzzle. This one is action-packed, fast-paced, very Australian, and I had quite a good time with it. but it did lack a little bit of depth. The cast was too big, in my opinion, for what the book had called for, but there were still some very lovely moments with the cast members that I could remember along the way. The next 3.5-star read I had was Moon Deeds by Palmer Pickering. This was quite good as a setup book, and this will have a full review here on the channel as well. We're following brother and sister Tor and Cassidy, who have been prophesied to be the Star Children. They don't really understand that, they don't really believe it at the moment, at least not within book 1, but there is an underlying current of this prophecy throughout the whole book. In book 1, it really is about establishing these characters and the world that we're in. So we have Tor, who's sort of a military trained sharpshooter, I think is what he was called, like a sniper for the current military, and we also have Cassidy, who's sort of a sheltered herbalist healer that has learnt this plant magic from her mother. Both of them have been affected by Tagia or the Tags. This is a bigger, badder military group that is taking over the world. Cassidy remembers they have some moon deeds or property on the moon and thinks maybe if we can escape to the moon, we can get our mum and dad here as well. So they basically venture to get onto the moon. Once they're on the moon, they realize that it's a little bit more desolate, a little bit more desperate than they were initially anticipating, and don't really know how to get these deeds into fruition to claim their rights to some of the property on the moon, seeing as there's a bigger power at play. And we sort of just really get an understanding of what life is like. It's a very sort of slice of life with this undercurrent of the prophecy as they come to understand that maybe it isn't all hearsay like they initially thought. I think this book was good. There was a lot of setup there, and I am looking forward to continuing on with the series to see if a lot of that setup pays off in the next installment. The next one I read was a 3.7-star read, and that was Ruination by Anthony Reynolds, basically with the rest of the world. So this one I picked up because I was bogged down in sci-fi. Sci-fi is not my preferred genre. I do enjoy it, but I tend to read it along with fantasy because I can read fantasy a lot quicker. My brain is more tailored to it, whereas sci-fi takes me a little bit longer to get into. So I was a bit burnt out by just even, 4 or 5 sci-fi books. I was like, I need something quick and easy, and I'd heard that this one was a breeze to get through. It arrived and I was like, you know what, sounds great, so I picked it on up. This one is following Callista and Viego. Callista is I hope I pronounced that name right, I think it's Callista. She is like a military boss, and Viego is her uncle, but sort of basically grew up as siblings. Viego's wife has been hit with a poisoned dagger, I believe it is, and he basically tasks Callista to go to some ancient hidden isles which they're not really sure exist to find a cure for his wife. This one was very easy to read. It's very easy, it is very comfortable fantasy, but it does not paint outside the box at all, in my opinion, which is why it got that 3.75 from me rather than sort of like an outstanding. Had a great time with it, and I think this is, if you're looking for something really easy to jump into and discover what fantasy is sort of all about, this one is a great option, and it reads super fast. I think I read it in 2 or 3 days, and for me, that's pretty fast. The highlight of my month was Becky Chambers' The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I gave this a 4.75 star. Now, I am learning that my tastes are vastly different when it comes to fantasy versus sci-fi. This is a very character-driven sci-fi. There's not a whole lot of plot, not a whole lot happens. We are sitting with this found family, and what a beautiful and inclusive found family this book had. This was such a delight to read that I've gone and I've picked up the other three books in the series, which I'll read hopefully with my friend Ryan in the next couple of months. But we are following what was her name? We are following a lass called Rosemary Harper. She's basically trying to hide her past identity, and she joins a crew on the Wayfarer. The Wayfarer is a ship that punches black holes through space so that people can travel through them. It's kind of a dangerous job, and they never had a bookkeeper, and they needed one, so Rosemary jumped on board. They are offered the job of a lifetime, which promises to pay for whatever they need forevermore, except it is much more dangerous than it was originally advertised because they're going into a war zone. So there's a lot of different moving pieces that are happening here, but for the most part, we just sort of sit with this crew. This had some of the best characters that I've read in this year, and I'm learning that I do love characters more in a sci-fi because sometimes the technical jargon just throws me out of the story. So this was absolutely delightful and I loved it, and I can't wait to continue on with the series. The last one that I picked up, and I have not finished yet, I'm 350 pages in, I've got just over 200 pages to go, is Iron Truth. This is by S.A. Tholen. This is the winner of the SPSFC of 2021, so that is the self-published science fiction competition. I can see why this won. There is a lot happening in this book, and it's not thin. You know, it's a big book, it's tall, it's got small text, and there's a lot happening in here. So this one we're following two POVs, Joy and Casimir. Joy basically went on this ship 119 years ago called the Ever Onward, if I'm remembering that correctly, and she thought she was going to wake up 5 years later on a new world that they could then colonize. Unfortunately, it crashed and it's turned up on a planet called Cato, and she wakes up 119 years later and she has no idea what's happened to her family on board. Casimir has been sent to Cato to basically recover another military ship, I believe it is, and he's like the big military personnel, and they have a connection of sorts, but they're both sort of not sure if they're going mad. It's really cool. I can't give too much away without going into the overall plot and spoilers, but the first half is definitely a setup between these characters, sort of learning where they come from, why they are the way that they are, and where I am now. Shit has just hit the fan, and it's awesome. I'm really, really enjoying it, but it is a slower read for me because there is so much happening. Those are the books that I read and one that I started in the month of September. What did you read? What was your favourite read for the month? Let me know in those comments down below. If you like the content, give it one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will, and I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.